Karen declares war on my parents for cutting a tree down on their own property. Posted by EAY 7712. I, a 25 male, have been living away from home ever since graduating from college. My parents both retired recently, and last summer they decided to use some of the money that they'd saved up to finally build their dream retirement home in New Orleans, where they've been living for the past 10 years. I come from a very tight-knit family, so I still talk to my parents every week, and they were so excited when they said they'd already picked out the location where they wanted the house built. It was an empty lot in a nice neighborhood where a house had been demolished not long before due to age, and the previous owner, who was pretty wealthy and owned numerous properties around the city, had decided that the lot was worth more without the house on it. Anyway, my parents snapped it up as soon as it came on the market, but not long after construction began, they realized that they were building their dream house right next door to the lair of a wild Karen. The trouble started when my parents had to cut down a large oak tree that sat in front of the lot. It was a real beauty too, one of those big southern live oaks, and although they didn't want to, they knew they had to remove it because it was in the way. No one likes to cut down a big beautiful tree, and believe me, if there was a way to avoid doing it without impeding the construction, my parents would have taken it. So they called a tree removal service, and the tree was soon gone. Well, a few days after the tree had been cut down, my dad was on the property talking to some of the construction guys and making sure that everything was going smoothly. He was going back to his car when he saw a woman in her late 50s walk out of the house next door and head to the mailbox. My dad, let's call him John, is a pretty chill and laid-back guy who likes to be on good terms with everyone, so he walked over and introduced himself. "Hi," he said, holding out his hand. "My name's John, and my wife and I are going to be your neighbors once our house is finished. I just wanted to come over and say hi and introduce myself. It's nice to meet you. What's your name?" Karen glanced at the extended hand and then looked up at my dad and glared at him. "My name is none of your business," she snapped. "I'm not going to shake your hand because of COVID, and even if there was no COVID, I still wouldn't shake your hand because you people ruined my life when you cut down my tree. I still can't believe how selfish you are. You should both be ashamed of yourselves." My dad was taken aback by this and pointed out that Karen already had a nice big oak tree in her backyard, but Karen ignored him and stalked back inside her house. She never explained why she thought that she was the owner of that tree that had been cut down, not once, and whenever my parents asked about it, she refused to answer. I guess it's just one of those things that we'll never know, like what really happened to the lost Roanoke colony or the fate of D.B. Cooper. My parents met some of their other neighbors later that day, including a nice elderly couple who lived in the other house next door to Karen's. And when my dad told them what had happened, the neighbors said that Karen was like that to everyone, and no one in the neighborhood liked her. They also said that Karen had been nasty to them for a long time, and that they were in the process of selling their house because they couldn't stand living next door to her anymore. Karen soon began living up to her reputation. For months, whenever my parents would visit the house to see how the construction was coming along, she'd find something to complain about or confront them about. One time, she said that construction workers were being too loud and threatened to call the police, even though it was the middle of the day. Another time, she said that the construction company was using illegal immigrants as cheap labor and threatened to call ICE and have the whole project shut down. My dad mentioned this to the owner of the company, and the owner sent Karen a formal letter threatening a lawsuit if she tried. I don't know if there were any actual grounds for a lawsuit, but the threat must have worked because ICE never showed up. Oh, and then there was the time that she tried to have my parents' car towed for illegal parking when they parked by the curb of their still unfinished house. The first my parents knew about this was when the tow truck showed up, but the driver took one look at where my parents' car was parked and told Karen that he'd send her a bill for wasting his time if she called him again. I could go on. I mean, Karen did everything she could think of to try and interfere. She was absolutely relentless in her crusade to avenge a tree that she never even owned. Happily, the house was completed despite her best efforts, and my parents finally moved in not long after the holidays. My mom told me later that she caught Karen watching them bitterly from her window as they were taking some of their boxes inside. She was concerned that Karen might keep going and try something else, but I guess Karen was too busy wallowing in self-pity over her failure or something because things were actually quiet for a while. But a few weeks ago, things changed. New Orleans has had some really bad weather lately due to the winter storms that are battering much of the southern U.S. right now. And one night, one of those storms was so powerful that it knocked over the tree in Karen's backyard. It missed falling onto her house, but it didn't miss falling onto her shiny new Jaguar and crushing it like a beer can. According to my folks, Karen didn't discover what happened until the following morning. When she came outside and saw the pile of scrap metal that used to be her car, she threw back her head and let out a primal scream like something out of The Exorcist. She had to pay a tree removal service to get rid of the tree, and then she had to pay for a tow truck to get rid of the car too. And then she had to get a rental car too. Karen put up her property for sale and moved out not long afterward. Everyone in the neighborhood was so glad to see her go, and my parents enjoyed watching her drive off into the sunset from the front porch of their amazing new house. Now, Karen did not sell her house right away. She put it on the market and moved out of it as soon as she could. I don't know where she is now, but I'm guessing that she's staying somewhere else while she waits for someone to buy the property. I don't know if anyone's bought it yet, but since there's a pandemic going on, I think she'll be waiting for some time. Give me your property, you don't need it right now, and the unexpected MVPs, posted by Blue Bindweed. I thought stores would be closed off or working much shorter hours during the holidays. Once I got to the store, I saw that it was, sadly for most people working there, mostly wrong. But that meant I would not need to buy much as I initially thought. I brought with me 3 reusable shopping bags, but ended up needing just one. While I can't say that I have an emotional attachment to these bags, I do like them very much. I bought them because I loved the design, the color and the print on them, and gave a bit more money than one would buying reusable shopping bags in the grocery store. They're nice, practical, and I like them. I finished loading my stuff onto the conveyor belt at the cash register, and I put the separator so that the person behind me doesn't waste time, but start uploading their haul. Last, I put my 3 bags on top of my stuff because I had them in the shopping cart while I was picking stuff up. While I am fishing out my wallet for my purse, I catch a flash of color in my periphery. I look up and see the woman behind me reached over and take 2 of my bags. Confused, I stutter, "Excuse me, those are not store bags. Those are my own property. Please give them back to me." Entitled woman Karen says, "I know these are not the store ones. I'm not an idiot. This store has red bags with their logo on them." "Okay, then why are you taking my property?" "You don't need all of them. Your groceries will fit nicely into just that one. I need these. Mind your own business and stop making a scene." Now I'm confused and getting irritated. I'm making a scene for confronting her politely about taking my stuff? But before I can even react, the older gentleman, who was a customer before me in the line, he had just finished paying for his bill, as well as the cashier, round up on this woman. The cashier says, "You will give her back her property, or I will have the security escort you out." The customer before me said, "How dare you behave as you are the one being inconvenienced? You take this girl's property and tell her that she does not need it and should not resist you. If you need reusable bags, just buy them for yourself." Karen starts huffing and puffing. "Now wait just a minute, why are you all making such a scene?" The cashier all but yells, "Now, I'm not negotiating or listening to you. Taking the property of others is stealing, no matter how you try to reason it." The cashier then picks up her mic and calls security to the register and looks at Karen sternly. "What'll it be?" Karen gives me back my bags while mumbling something about, "It's just a few worthless bags." I thank the cashier and the old man and go on my merry way. I did not do much but stand my ground, but the cashier and the old man were the MVPs. It did warm my heart that people saw something nasty and immediately jumped in to correct the foul behavior. Jiffy Lube didn't put oil in my car. What are my legal options? Posted by Wizzoman. Yesterday, I took my car to Jiffy Lube for a routine oil change. After leaving their shop, I drove 20 to 30 minutes and my car seized up in a busy intersection. I was able to start it up again and get to a parking lot about 100 yards away. Upon checking, I found out that they didn't put oil back in my car. I have evidence in the form of photos showing the lack of oil and any warning lights that appeared on my dashboard. I immediately stopped driving and contacted the store. I was put on hold and then the manager said that they would check the footage and get back to me. He then calls me on his cell phone and says it looks like that they put oil in, but they aren't sure they put enough and he's going to drive out to me immediately to come put oil in. When he gets there, he says after watching the footage, his tech didn't put a drop of oil in the car and he was extremely sorry and they're going to tow it and make everything right. Today, he called me and said, "Great news, the car is up and running and his district manager is coming down to sign off on it and we'll be back on the road." I was giving pushback because I do not feel comfortable driving the car now because there's no way it doesn't have damage. His response is that he only deals in black and white and what's real, and I can't trust what Google has to say, and he's got the car right in front of him and it's looking good. On this call, he casually mentioned that the car wouldn't start in the morning and he had to do a bunch of work to get it up and running. He also stated that when he changed the oil again this morning, he found metal shavings. He also mentioned on our 22-minute call that there is still a check engine light on for what he believes is a misfire and the engine is making a noise. Yet, he feels he should be able to correct all these problems and it will be good enough for me to drive by tomorrow. Keep in mind, I've been recording our call since the start, so I have proof of him admitting all of this. I'm hoping to get advice on what should my next step be if they refuse to replace the engine and pay for a new car. Am I owed anything due to the negligence of emptying my car of oil, failing to fill it up, having me pay, and letting me drive off? Plus the risk of having my car seize up on the highway or a more dangerous situation, not to mention the sentimental value of the car being my first car. Is there anything specific I should document or do to ensure that I have a strong case if this escalates? Has anyone here ever had a similar experience, and how'd you handle it? Commenter says and OP replies, "You need to have a good mechanic assess whether there is lasting damage, then you'll have a baseline to work from for any lawsuit and or insurance claim. As for the risk of whether this or that happened, not worth mentioning, same for the sentimental value." OP replies, "He said if there's a second opinion, they get to choose the mechanic and I can't take it to the dealership or it'll absolve them of any responsibility. I'm not a lawyer, but they're not mechanics and you do not take advice from the people you're probably going to have to sue. What do you think?" Boss tries to give disciplinary action for working too hard, posted by Asian Clooney. Midway through my career, I found myself working for the most prominent private college in my state. I was in the IT department and was in charge of maintaining a few servers and all of the technology in the classrooms. Every summer, we would receive our budget for the year, and part of the budget that I managed was spent mostly on upgrading the audio-video presentation systems in the classrooms, and most of that work had to take place during the summer. This is fine normally, but our college administration had created a ticking time bomb for me a few years before. They had decided to spend about $100,000 on a few classrooms, but did not allocate any money in our budget to replace the equipment when it would eventually fail. I had been there for 5 years, and now that equipment was starting to fail. Increasing our budget was not an option, despite faculty growing to depend on the equipment in these spaces. I was left to figure out how to make the same budget replace all of the equipment in those spaces, as well as the normal set of classrooms that would need to be upgraded elsewhere. Fine, I was up for the challenge. I had to simplify and purchase more value brand of equipment and do extra work to cut corners. A couple of weeks of shipping delays for the majority of the equipment saw me with roughly 1 month to rip out, replace, rewire, and configure about 15 classrooms, as well as update and test all of the existing classrooms within about a month before the semester began. Realizing the amount of work ahead of me, I began working. I came in every day of the week for 28 days straight, working 8 to 10 hours to ensure that when that semester began, the professors would have working equipment. I was salary, so I didn't have to clock in. This gave me the freedom of schedule to work as little or as much as required. I worked myself sick and was literally sick at the end of the 28 days. My supervisor was a guy that we recently hired. Let's call him Gus. Near the beginning of the semester, while testing equipment, I realized that the audio driver in a common model of computer that we have in the classrooms was corrupted. Investigating it, I realized that the computer manufacturer had corrupted drivers on their web server where we downloaded it from. I asked my supervisor, who was in charge of managing the image deployment server, to rebuild the image with a non-corrupt version of the driver that I'd provided him, and he said that he would. I swing by the next day and I asked him if he had completed the rebuild. He had not. I tell him that I really need it as the semester loomed closer and closer, and he tells me he'll work on it. Next day, nothing. Day after that, nothing. Finally, he figures it out and I continue my work. He must have not liked being pressured, and perhaps the perception that he was incompetent, he must have gotten to him. He decides to power trip and call me into his office and ask why I was working so much. I explained the administrative oversight a few years prior, shipping delays, cheaper equipment, extra required work, and his delaying of a working image. I tell him, hey look, I came in day after day after day asking for that rebuilt image. Each time that I said day, I am poking my finger straight down on the edge of his desk, enough that it makes a sound to emphasize that those delays hurt the work that I was doing. He wanted to find some personal failing that he could pull out of some disciplinary action around. I gave him none. Eventually, he ran out of ideas and I left his office, not thinking much of it. Gus, however, was a brown-noser of the highest order. He would follow our IT director like a puppy. He joined a band with my IT director, so my work situation was not exactly fair. The semester began and not a single issue in all of the classrooms was reported. I was proud of the work that I was able to complete given the challenges. The second day of the semester, my IT director calls me into his office. There, Gus is sitting beside him and they both want to talk to me. I don't like the looks of this. My IT director starts asking me about why I was working so much. I explained to him, as I did Gus, the various factors that made this summer's work extra challenging. This destroyed any valid criticism they could muster. Gus goes on to say that he innocently inquired about my work and that I became violent, talking about the gesture that I made on his desk, illustrating his failure to do his work in a timely manner. I demonstrate exactly what I did on the IT director's desk to show how ridiculous of a claim that it was. My IT director wanted to exert his authority, and they would not stop until they had something to discipline me with. Nothing I would say would change the result. I was to be in trouble for whatever transgression they imagined up in this meeting. I make sure to point out how long it took Gus to do the small task that I depended on, knowing that I could have completed it in about an hour. He was incompetent. My IT director then alludes to the fact that I should respect Gus more as he is my supervisor. Screw it, I think to myself. I then tell my director, it is as if Justin Bieber was trying to teach you about music theory. It's only going to tick you off. This sudden, sharp, and, in my opinion, hilarious comparison was too funny. Both Gus and my IT director immediately laughed their butts off, even though Gus was the subject of this insult. Once they had stopped laughing, my IT director put on a more serious tone. He says that I could manage my time better despite the unique circumstances of this summer's work. His voice gets really soft and slow while he's talking to me now. This is a trick he forgot that he told me that he uses in arguments to make the other person seem like they're out of control. It is condescending, as if spoken to as a child, and now he is using it on me. He tells me that he wants me to take some time management class, also to take a couple of days off and think about it. I just want you to think about it. However, he is going to need my keys and badge. Cue malicious compliance. At this point, he has provided me enough evidence that this is not a job that I want to stay at. The absurdity of working so hard and for 28 days straight on salary with no extra pay and to be rewarded with a disciplinary action was too much. In that moment, I had thought about it. Without saying anything, I hand over my badge. I took all of the many keys off of my keyring and set them on his desk. I have thought about it, I tell him in the exact soft and condescending tone he used with me. And you can keep the keys and the badge, I told him with the biggest wry smile on my face. I then walk to my office. He follows me and I notice his eyes had become glassy, as if he was hurt by the situation unfolding before him. He expected me to capitulate and accept his punishment for a job well done. He kept saying, "I just want you to think about," with each time becoming increasingly desperate. And I kept repeating, "I have thought about it." He disappears back into his office with his little minion, Gus, to discuss damage control. I quickly pen an email to all my other coworkers letting them know that I was leaving and that I enjoyed working with them. I had to work quick as I knew they would shut down all of my accounts very quickly. I packed up my personal effects and left. Gus and my IT director offered to help me, trying to walk back the situation with some small gesture of goodwill, but I was gone. I had been there for 5 years, but I was willing to walk away the moment that he tried to treat me so poorly. I found out a little later that the week before I left, a programmer that we hired had left after he treated her poorly too. I was not aware of the reason that she left when she did, but our office manager shared that she quit abruptly like me without anything lined up given his behavior. About a year later, I hear from the office manager that the IT director had left. Rumor is he was primarily working for another company while in his office at the college, effectively double dipping or making money for 2 jobs while only doing 1. He had been caught doing so and was warned by the administration to stop. He opted to leave instead of owning up to his own dubious behavior. My only regret is that I didn't leave that job sooner. An update. Many comments have mentioned that I did this to myself and I gave them free work, or that I should have not worked myself so hard. I chose to. That was never the issue. That my director discounted the challenges I faced and insisted that it was personal failing was beyond me. I never complained to my director or supervisor about the situation until they tried to discipline me and I had to unpack the circumstances for them. When I started the job, several rooms and event spaces were non-functional and had fallen into disrepair. Issues existed across all of the classrooms. I worked there for 1.5 years to fix all of these issues and return them to working order. Once I had implemented more permanent fixes and solutions, we went from 4 to 5 reported issues a day to a few every couple of weeks. I eventually implemented turnkey automated systems that made my job very easy. At this point, I started assisting Gus in the help desk, and he was the help desk manager. I worked with him and another support coworker to push down the help desk tickets. No one asked me to do this, and I worked very well with them. I helped Gus with issues that he could not fix, and he was appreciative. This was not required of me, but I helped because I had locked down and automated all of my systems. But Gus was lazy, took smoke breaks all day, and made student workers who knew very little, but more than him, try to fix the issues. I did not have a problem with him until I had to depend on him. Years of doing this work had shown me that addressing the issues while campus was empty took a lot less total time, as I had to schedule my work around classes and so on. Though it was stressful, fielding all of the complaints and getting additional pressure from my director if classrooms were not working would be worse, stress-wise. Once the semester began, I was fine. Had I remained, I would have taken time off and coasted through the semester like previous summers. All of that extra work would have been balanced by a lot of days where I took a more relaxed pace and worked no extra hours for months. Some comments mentioned that I should have used this as a feedback mechanism to management. That is a private sector mentality. Academia works through grants and endowments. Just as I had entered the college to find whole rooms offline, the administration would have let those rooms break down and let the faculty deal with it. I worked so hard because I cared about the work that I did, the faculty I supported, and how that reflected on me. One last thing, when I started working there, I tried a more communicative relationship with my director. Eventually, they got annoyed and left me with no direction. I had to determine my own projects and schedule unless something came down from administration that required our department. Directors in colleges are more focused on high visibility projects and padding their resumes. Attention is paid only when problems arise. Karen puts a disabled man in my ER. I press charges. Click the video on your screen so you find out what happens, and I'll see you there.